The faded floral pattern of the armchair had long since lost its vibrancy, much like the dreams I'd quietly set aside over the years. I traced the worn armrest, a familiar comfort, as the distant hum of the washing machine filled the silence of my living room. My name is Martha. I'm 68 years old, a retired nurse, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been an open book for my family, its pages filled with their needs and my willingness to meet them. It started subtly, years ago, with small requests. Then they grew, like weeds in a neglected garden. My son, Jason, always the ambitious one, came to me when he was 35, full of grand plans for his tech startup. He was 42 now, and that startup had seen more of my savings than it had success. "Mom, just a cosign," he'd said, his eyes bright with a future I desperately wanted for him. "It's just a formality. You know how banks are with new businesses." I signed, of course. My signature was on his first business loan, then a second, and eventually a third. Each time I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, but the thought of seeing Jason succeed, of him building something for himself, always outweighed the fear. My daughter Sarah, 39 now, was different. Her dreams were more tangible, more immediate. When she was 28, she wanted the perfect wedding. "Mom, it's just once," she'd pleaded, her voice a mix of excitement and a subtle pressure I knew well. "We just need a little extra for the venue, for the dress." I dipped into my retirement savings, the nest egg I'd meticulously built over 40 years of nursing. That year, I wore the same 2 cardigans all winter, and my shoes had holes in the soles, but Sarah's wedding photos were beautiful. She looked like a princess. I remember watching her dance, a genuine smile on my face, even as a quiet ache settled in my chest. It wasn't just the money. It was the quiet sacrifice of my own comfort, my own desires, that went unnoticed. Just last year, Sarah and her husband decided they needed a bigger house. She called me, not to ask for advice, but to inform me. "Mom, we found the perfect place, but the down payment is just out of reach. You can always help us out, right?" She said it so casually, as if it were a given. I remember looking at my own modest home, the one I'd worked so hard for, and feeling a strange disconnect. My heart sank, but I just smiled into the phone and said, "Of course, dear." I found myself nodding along, agreeing to another loan, another chunk of my dwindling security, feeling that familiar pang of despair. They never asked if I could help, only assumed I would. It was always, "Mom, you can always help us out, right?" Or, "You're the best, Mom. You always come through." And I always did. I rarely bought new clothes for myself anymore. My wardrobe was a collection of timeless pieces, which was a polite way of saying they were old. My car, a reliable sedan, was pushing 15 years. I didn't mind, not really. Their happiness was my happiness, or so I told myself. I'd always believed that family meant looking out for each other, and I'd taken that to heart, perhaps too literally. One Tuesday evening, after a quiet dinner alone, I was heading to the kitchen for a cup of tea when I heard voices from Jason's office, which he used when he worked from home. He and Sarah were on a video call, their voices low but clear enough. I paused, about to announce my presence, but something in their tone stopped me. "And with Mom's house, we could finally clear the rest of the debt," Jason was saying, his voice a little too casual. "Are you sure she'll go for it?" Sarah asked, a hint of hesitation in her voice. "She's pretty attached to that place." Jason scoffed. "Attached? Sarah, she's 68. What does she need a big house for? She's barely using half of it. It's just sitting there collecting dust. Besides, she's always saying she wants to help us. This is the biggest help she could give." My hand froze on the doorknob, the cup of tea forgotten. My home, the place where I'd raised them, where every scratch on the floorboards held a memory. They were discussing it as if it were an old piece of furniture, something to be repurposed or perhaps discarded. A cold dread settled over me, a feeling I couldn't quite name, but it was sharp and undeniable. The casual dismissal in Jason's voice, the way they spoke about my life, my home, my finances, as if I wasn't even in the house, let alone a participant in my own future. The shifting dynamics they hinted at weren't just shifting, they were crumbling beneath my feet. The echo of Jason's dismissive words about my home lingered in the quiet house, a sour taste in my mouth. I tried to shake it off, to tell myself I'd misheard, or that they didn't mean it the way it sounded. But the seed of unease had been planted, and it began to sprout in the weeks that followed. It wasn't just my finances or my home they seemed to be discussing behind my back. It was everything. My opinions, once sought, were now brushed aside with a casual wave of the hand. I remember a conversation with Jason about his business, a new marketing strategy he was considering. I'd spent decades observing people, understanding motivations, and I offered a suggestion, something I thought might resonate better with his target demographic. He listened, nodded, then said, "Thanks, Mom, but we've already decided to go with the agency's plan. They're the experts, after all." His tone was polite, but the message was clear. My input wasn't valued. It was a familiar pattern, one that had started subtly, but was now becoming glaringly obvious. Sarah, too, had developed a habit of making decisions and then simply informing me. Last month, her youngest, Leo, had a persistent cough. I, with my nursing background, suggested a specific herbal remedy that had always worked wonders for me and my patients. "Oh, Mom," she'd said, a little too quickly, "we're just going to stick with what the doctor prescribed. No offense, but things have changed a lot since you were nursing." The dismissal stung, not because I was right or wrong, but because my experience, my wisdom, was deemed irrelevant. The most painful instance came during a family gathering at Jason's house a few weeks later. It was my grandson, Michael's, 10th birthday, and the house was buzzing with laughter and the chaos of children. I sat on the edge of the sofa, watching them, feeling a strange detachment. Jason and Sarah were in the middle of the living room, animated, talking over each other. "So we booked it," Sarah announced, clapping her hands. 2 weeks in Italy. Can you believe it?" A chorus of excited exclamations followed. Jason's wife, Maria, hugged Sarah. "That's amazing. When do you leave?" "Next spring for Easter break," Jason chimed in, beaming. "We've been planning it for months, keeping it a secret." My smile faltered. Italy, 2 weeks, Easter break. They had been planning it for months, and I was hearing about it for the very first time, along with everyone else. I pictured them, huddled over travel brochures, discussing itineraries, booking flights, all without a single word to me. "No, Mom, we're thinking of a trip. What do you think?" Or even a simple, We're going to Italy before the grand announcement. I felt a cold wave wash over me, a stark realization that I wasn't just left out of the planning. I was an afterthought, a spectator in their lives. The joyous laughter around me suddenly sounded hollow, echoing my growing sense of isolation. I felt like a ghost in my own family, present but unseen, unheard. Despite the ache, the feeling of being sidelined, I still found myself accommodating them. When Sarah mentioned needing someone to water her plants while they were away, I immediately offered. When Jason complained about a leaky faucet, I found a plumber for him, even paid for the service myself, just to be helpful. It was a deeply ingrained habit, a lifetime of putting their needs first, and it was proving incredibly difficult to break. My heart ached, but my hands still reached out, trying to bridge a gap that seemed to widen with every passing day. I told myself it was just a phase, that they were busy, that I was overthinking things. But deep down, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The respect, the inherent trust, the feeling of being an integral part of their lives. It was eroding, slowly but surely. The phone rang late one afternoon, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Sarah. Her voice was bright, cheerful. "Mom, we're having a family dinner next Saturday. Just a casual get-together. Can you make it?" A family dinner. The words sounded so normal, so inviting. For a moment, a flicker of hope ignited within me. Maybe this was it, a chance to reconnect, to feel like myself again, in the warmth of my children's company. But then, the memory of Jason's casual dismissal, Sarah's unconsulted trip, and the hushed conversation about my house resurfaced. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. A casual get-together, or was it? I felt a prickle of unease, a premonition that this dinner, seemingly innocuous, held an unspoken tension, a hidden agenda waiting to surface. The family dinner invitation from Sarah hung in the air, a seemingly innocent offer that now felt laced with an unsettling undertone. I accepted, of course, because that's what I did. I always showed up. But as the week progressed, a gnawing sense of apprehension settled in. A few days before the dinner, Jason called. His voice, usually confident and brisk, had a softer, almost cajoling quality. "Mom, I know I ask a lot, but this is it, the big one. My business is on the cusp of a huge expansion, a new product line that's going to revolutionize the market. We just need one final push, a significant investment to get us over the line." My heart sank. Another loan, another final push. I was 68, and my savings were a shadow of what they once were. The thought of co-signing another loan, especially for a business that had yet to truly take off, filled me with dread. I remembered the conversation I'd overheard, the casual way they'd discussed my house. Was this connected? Was this the biggest help she could give? "Jason," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "You know I've helped you so much already. My resources are limited." He quickly interjected, "Mom, this isn't just for me. This is for the whole family. Think of the future. Once this takes off, we'll all be set. Sarah and I, the grandkids, Girsa. It's for everyone. And it's just a bridge loan, a short-term thing. We'll pay you back with interest within 6 months, tops. I promise." He laid it on thick, painting a picture of a prosperous future, a family legacy built on my sacrifice. The mention of the grandkids, my beloved Michael and Leo, was a particularly effective tactic. He knew my weaknesses. I hesitated, the familiar conflict tearing at me. My rational mind screamed no, but the lifetime habit of putting my children first, of wanting to see them succeed, was a powerful current. I pictured their faces, their hopeful eyes. I wanted to believe him, to believe in their dreams. "How much are we talking about, Jason?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He named a figure that made my stomach clench. It was substantial, more than I was comfortable with, even as a bridge loan. But he pressed on, detailing the business plan, the market potential, the supposed guarantees. He made it sound like a sure thing, a golden opportunity. And against my better judgment, against the quiet warnings of my own intuition, I reluctantly agreed. "All right, Jason, one last time, but this is it. You're the best, Mom. I knew I could count on you." His voice was genuinely relieved, almost triumphant. The call ended, leaving me with a hollow feeling, a sense of having given away a piece of myself I couldn't afford to lose. In the days leading up to the family dinner, I noticed more hushed conversations. Jason and Sarah would often step away from me, their heads close together, whispering. If I walked into a room, they'd suddenly fall silent or change the subject abruptly. It was subtle, but it was there, a constant undercurrent of secrecy. I saw them on their phones, tapping away, sometimes exchanging knowing glances. They were making arrangements, that much was clear. But what arrangements, and why was I always excluded? One afternoon, I arrived at Sarah's house a little early for the dinner. The front door was ajar, and I heard voices from the living room. Thinking it was just Sarah and her husband, I walked in, calling out, "Hello? Sarah, it's me." I stepped into the living room and stopped dead. Jason, Sarah, and her husband were all there, gathered around the coffee table. Spread out before them were documents, papers with legal-looking headings, and what looked like blueprints or floor plans. My heart gave a jolt. They looked up startled, their faces a mixture of surprise and something else, annoyance, guilt. "Mom, you're early," Sarah said, her voice a little too bright, a little too forced. She quickly began gathering the papers, sweeping them into a neat pile. "Just thought I'd help set the table," I said, trying to sound casual, my eyes darting to the papers, trying to catch a glimpse of what they were. I recognized a familiar address on one of the documents before Sarah quickly covered it. My address. Jason cleared his throat. "Yeah, we were just going over some old paperwork. Nothing important." He avoided my gaze. The air in the room was thick with unspoken words, with a tension that was almost palpable. They were clearly having a meeting, a discussion about something significant, something they didn't want me to know about. And it involved my home. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I wasn't just uninvited to the discussion. I was the subject of it. My finances, my house, my future, all being decided without me. I forced a smile, though my lips felt stiff. "Oh, all right then. Let me help you in the kitchen, Sarah." I turned away. The image of my address on that document burned into my mind. The unease that had been growing within me now solidified into a cold, hard lump of dread. I was being set up. I just didn't know for what or how devastating it would be. The family dinner that evening was a blur of forced smiles and strained conversation. I tried to act normal, to laugh at Jason's jokes and praise Sarah's cooking. But the image of my address on those documents, the hushed voices, the quick cover-up. It all swirled in my mind, making it hard to swallow. I felt like I was sitting at my own wake, listening to people discuss my legacy while I was still very much alive. A few days later, the unease gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was happening, something that directly involved me, but was being kept secret. I found myself replaying every conversation, every glance, every hurried whisper. I thought about the new loan for Jason's business. The final push he'd promised would benefit the whole family. Was this all part of a larger scheme? I decided to try and reach Sarah. I needed to talk to her, to understand what was going on. I picked up my phone, my fingers fumbling a little with the touchscreen. I rarely used it for anything beyond calls and the occasional text, and navigating the apps was still a bit of a challenge. I scrolled through my contacts, looking for Sarah's name. As I scrolled, my thumb accidentally brushed against an icon I didn't recognize. A green speech bubble with a phone symbol, WhatsApp. I knew Jason and Sarah used it, but I'd never bothered to set it up for myself. The app opened, and to my surprise, it was already logged in. It must have been from when Sarah or Jason had helped me set up my phone months ago and forgotten to log out. My eyes scanned the screen, and there it was, right at the top of the chat list, a group chat. The name hit me like a physical blow. Real family. My breath hitched. Real family. The words twisted in my gut. What did that make me then? Not real. An outsider. My heart began to pound, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I tapped on the chat, my fingers trembling. The messages scrolled down, a casual stream of conversations, plans and jokes. And then I saw it, a message from Jason. So, we're all agreed then? Mom's house is the fastest way to clear the debt and free up capital for the new venture. My vision blurred. Mom's house. They were discussing selling my home, the home I'd lived in for over 40 years, the place where I'd raised them, where every wall held a memory. They were talking about it as if it were a commodity, an asset to be liquidated for their benefit. I scrolled further, my eyes darting from one message to the next, each one a fresh stab to the heart. Sarah, are you sure she won't put up a fight? She's so sentimental about it. Jason, she's 68, Sarah. She's not going to fight us. She's always done what's best for us. Besides, she needs to downsize. Anyway, it's too much for her to manage. Sarah, true, and it would help us out so much with the new house. We could finally get rid of that second mortgage. Jason, exactly. It's a win-win. We get the capital, and she gets a smaller place, less upkeep. We'll tell her it's for her own good. She'll understand. She always does. My hands were shaking so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. They viewed me as a burden. My home, my sanctuary, was just a means to an end. They weren't just excluding me. They were actively making decisions about my life, my future, without a shred of consultation or respect. The casual entitlement, the sheer audacity of it, was breathtaking. Then I saw a message from Jason that made my blood run cold. He had attached a screenshot. It was a picture of my living room, taken from the doorway, showing my worn armchair, my old photographs on the mantelpiece, and beneath it, his caption, "Look at this place. It's practically falling apart. We'd be doing her a favor. She's too old to keep up with it. Plus, think of the equity we can pull out of it. $150,000 easily." He was mocking me, mocking my home, the place I cherished, the place I'd poured my life into. He saw it as a dilapidated burden, a source of untapped wealth. The cruelty of it, the cold calculation, was a physical blow. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, followed by a searing humiliation. They saw me as a problem to be solved, a financial obstacle to be overcome. I was not a mother, not a person with feelings or desires, but a resource to be exploited. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and stinging, but they didn't fall. Instead, a different sensation began to stir within me, a cold, hard resolve. The pain was immense, a gaping wound in my chest, but through it, a flicker of something else ignited. Anger, not the helpless, despairing kind, but a fierce, protective rage. I looked at the phone, at the real family chat, at the picture of my living room, and a quiet voice, one I hadn't heard in years, spoke inside me. It was the voice of the young nurse who had stood up for her patients, the woman who had always fought for what was right. "No more," I whispered, my voice hoarse but firm. "No more." The words were a vow, a declaration of war. The shattering pain was still there, but beneath it, a survival instinct, dormant for too long, had finally kicked in. My transformation had begun. The phone felt like a block of ice in my trembling hand. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat that echoed the shock coursing through me. Anger, cold and sharp, mingled with a profound sadness. How could they? How could my own children, the ones I had devoted my life to, speak of me and my home with such callous disregard? The humiliation was a raw wound, but beneath it, a steely resolve began to harden. "No more," I had whispered, and the words resonated with a power I hadn't felt in years. I stared at the real family chat, the messages mocking me from the screen. My first instinct was to call them, to scream, to demand answers. But then, a flicker of clarity. What would that achieve? More lies? More dismissals? No. This wasn't about an argument. It was about a fundamental betrayal of trust, a deep-seated disrespect that had been festering for years. My fingers still shaking, moved with a newfound purpose. I found the option to delete the group chat. With a decisive tap, it vanished from my screen. It was a small act, almost insignificant, but it felt like severing a toxic limb. Then I went into my phone settings and found the WhatsApp application. I uninstalled it. I didn't want any part of their real family anymore. Next, my bank. I opened my banking app, my mind racing. I needed to protect what little I had left. I changed all my passwords, one by one, making them complex and unique. I reviewed my accounts, checking for any unusual activity, any unauthorized access. There was none, thankfully, but the thought that they might try, that they might feel entitled to my money, was a chilling realization. I also set up two-factor authentication on everything, a measure of security I'd always dismissed as unnecessary. Now, it felt vital. As I worked, a wave of memories washed over me, a painful montage of past interactions, Jason's endless bridge loans, Sarah's extravagant wedding and house down payment, the casual requests for help that were never really requests, but demands. I saw the pattern now, clear as day. The way they'd always minimized my contributions, the way they'd spoken about my generosity as if it were an endless wellspring, rather than the result of my own hard work and careful saving. I remembered the time Jason had borrowed a significant sum for a supposed investment opportunity, promising to pay it back within months. That was 3 years ago, and I hadn't seen a dime of it. I'd always brushed it off, told myself he was busy, that he'd get around to it. Now I saw it for what it was, exploitation. And Sarah, always so sweet and charming, had a way of making me feel guilty if I ever hesitated to help. "But Mom, it's for the grandkids," she'd say, and my resolve would crumble. I had been manipulated, gently but consistently, for years. The realization was empowering in its clarity, even as it brought a fresh wave of pain. I had been so blind, so trusting. The house felt too quiet, too heavy with the weight of my revelations. I needed to get out, to breathe. I slipped on my walking shoes and stepped outside, the cool evening air a welcome balm on my flushed face. I walked aimlessly at first, then found myself gravitating towards Emily's house. Emily Johnson, my best friend for over 50 years, lived just 3 blocks away. She was 70, 2 years my senior, and had always been a rock, a voice of reason. I hadn't told her the full extent of my children's financial demands, always downplaying them, too ashamed to admit how much I was giving away. But now I needed her. I needed someone. I knocked on her door, my knuckles rapping softly. Emily opened it, her kind eyes widening slightly at the sight of me. "Martha, what on earth? You look like you've seen a ghost." I stepped inside, the familiar scent of her brewing chamomile tea, a small comfort. "Worse, Emily, much worse," my voice cracked. She led me to her kitchen table, pouring me a cup of tea without a word. She just sat there, patiently, her hand resting gently on mine. And then the dam broke. The words tumbled out, a torrent of anger, hurt, and humiliation. I told her everything, the overheard conversation about my house, the family dinner, the hidden documents, and finally, the real family. WhatsApp group. I described the messages, the casual cruelty, Jason's mocking screenshot. Emily listened, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief, then to a quiet fury. When I finished, the silence in the kitchen was thick. "Martha," she said, her voice low and steady. "I knew they were taking advantage, but this is beyond the pale. They're treating you like an ATM, and now they want to sell your home out from under you. That's not family, Martha. That's a hostile takeover." Her words, blunt and honest, were exactly what I needed. She didn't sugarcoat it, didn't try to make excuses for them. "You've given them your whole life, Martha. It's time you started living for yourself. You have rights, you have options." She leaned forward, her eyes firm. "Do you have your house deeds, your financial statements, all those loan documents you signed for them?" I nodded, my mind already racing. "They're in my old filing cabinet in the study." "Good," Emily said, a determined glint in her eye, "because the first thing you're going to do tomorrow morning is call a lawyer, a good one, and you're going to find out exactly where you stand. You are not alone in this, Martha, not anymore." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me from the depths of despair. The shock was still there, the anger a simmering fire, but a new feeling was taking root, a burgeoning sense of empowerment. Emily's unwavering support, her practical advice, reinforced the resolve that had sparked within me. I was not alone, and I was certainly not going to be a victim. Emily's words had been a powerful tonic. I left her house that evening, not with the crushing weight of despair, but with a simmering determination. The anger was still there, a hot, ember in my chest, but it was now fueled by a sense of purpose. I wasn't just hurt, I was ready to fight. The next morning, I woke with a clear head, a rare feeling after weeks of emotional turmoil. Emily had given me the name of a lawyer, a family friend who specialized in elder law and property disputes. I called her office first thing, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hand. They scheduled an appointment for me for the following week. Before the appointment, I knew I needed to gather everything. My study, a room I hadn't properly organized in years, was filled with boxes of old papers, tax documents, and forgotten mementos. I pulled out the dusty filing cabinet, its drawers groaning in protest. This was where I kept everything important, or at least what I thought was important. I started sifting through the files, a methodical process that brought back a flood of memories, old utility bills, expired insurance policies, photographs of the children when they were small, and then, tucked away in a folder labeled House Deeds, I found it. The original title, Deeds to My Home. I pulled them out, the paper crisp and official. My name, Martha Evans, was clearly printed as the sole owner. It was mine, my sanctuary. I continued to search, pulling out bank statements, old loan agreements, and receipts. I found the records of the co-signed loans for Jason's business ventures, each document a stark reminder of my financial sacrifices. There were the transfers to Sarah for her wedding, the down payment for her house. I even found a detailed ledger I'd kept years ago, meticulously tracking every significant sum I'd given them, every loan that had never been repaid. It was all there, a mountain of evidence of my unwavering support and their casual exploitation. As I compiled the documents, a different kind of emotion began to surface. Not just anger, but a quiet sense of pride. I had worked hard for this, for every penny, for this home. And I had given so much, not out of weakness, but out of love. But that love had been taken for granted, twisted into a tool for their own gain. The contrast between my selfless intentions and their calculating betrayal was stark. The day of my legal appointment arrived. I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that made me feel composed, professional. Emily insisted on driving me, her presence a comforting anchor. The lawyer's office was quiet, tastefully decorated, a stark contrast to the chaotic, emotional landscape of my home. The lawyer, a woman named Ms. Davies, was warm and empathetic. I sat across from her, a thick folder of documents on my lap, and began to tell my story. I laid out the timeline of my financial support, the co-signed loans, the gifts, the overheard conversations, the WhatsApp messages. I showed her the title deeds, the bank statements, the ledger. Ms. Davies listened patiently, taking notes, her expression serious but never dismissive. She asked clarifying questions, her legal expertise cutting through the emotional fog. When I finished, she leaned back, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Martha," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "You have a very strong case here. Based on these documents, your home is solely in your name. They have no legal claim to it. Furthermore, the co-signed loans and the documented transfers suggest a pattern of financial exploitation. We can explore options to recover those funds, especially the more recent substantial loans." Then she said something that made my heart leap. "And based on the current market value of your property and what you owe on your mortgage, you have a significant amount of equity in this home, roughly $150,000, perhaps more. $150,000. The number Jason had casually thrown around in the WhatsApp chat, the amount he saw as theirs for the taking. But it wasn't theirs. It was mine. It was my equity, built over decades of careful payments and rising property values. The realization was a revelation. This wasn't just about protecting my home. It was about reclaiming my financial footing, my independence. Ms. Davies outlined my options: sending cease and desist letters, pursuing legal action for the unpaid loans, and most importantly, securing my assets. She spoke of protecting my home, of ensuring my financial security for my retirement. The respect she showed me, the validation of my feelings, was a stark contrast to the casual dismissal I'd grown accustomed to from my own children. She treated me not as a burden, but as a client, a person with rights and agency. As I left her office, the sun felt brighter, the air crisper. The heavy weight that had settled on my shoulders for so long had begun to lift. I had the documents. I had the legal advice. I had the equity. The power was not with them, not with their real family chat. It was with me. I have the power, I whispered to myself, the words a quiet assertion, a promise. My independence, my strength, had been there all along, buried under layers of sacrifice and misplaced trust. Now it was finally unearthed. The knowledge that I held the power was a quiet revolution within me. With Ms. Davies' guidance, I began to take concrete steps to secure my future, to dismantle the financial web my children had so skillfully woven around me. The first step was the hardest, but also the most liberating. I updated my will. For years, Jason and Sarah had been my sole beneficiaries, a testament to my unwavering belief that everything I had would eventually be theirs. Now, I removed them completely. It wasn't an act of malice, but of self-preservation. My hard-earned assets would no longer be a convenient solution to their financial woes. I designated a portion to a charity I deeply admired, and the rest, I decided, would be for my own security, for my peace of mind. The legal documents felt heavy in my hand, but signing them brought a profound sense of relief. It was a declaration of independence, a clear boundary drawn in legal ink. The shift in power dynamics didn't take long to manifest. Jason was the first to realize something was amiss. He called, his voice laced with a forced cheerfulness. "Hey, Mom, just checking in. Any news on that bridge loan we talked about?" My business expansion is really picking up steam, and we're ready to finalize everything. I took a deep breath. "Jason," I said, my voice calm, "I've reconsidered the loan. I won't be able to provide it." Silence on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. "What?" "Mom, what are you talking about? We shook on it. You promised." His voice was rising, losing its earlier pleasantness. "I'm sorry, Jason, but my financial situation has changed. I simply can't afford it." It wasn't entirely a lie. My financial situation had changed because I was no longer willing to sacrifice my security for his ambition. But this is critical, Mom. This could ruin everything. You know how much this means to me, to the family." He sounded genuinely panicked, the entitlement cracking to reveal desperation. "I understand that, Jason," I replied, my voice unwavering. "But I have to look out for myself now. I will not be your safety net anymore." He spluttered, trying to argue, to cajole, to guilt trip. "Mom, don't you care about your own son, about your grandchildren's future?" "I care very much, Jason," I said, my voice firm. but my caring will no longer extend to jeopardizing my own well-being. You're a grown man. You need to find your own solutions. I hung up before he could respond, my hand trembling slightly, but my resolve unshaken. Sarah called soon after, clearly having heard from Jason. Her tone was a mix of concern and thinly veiled anger. "Mom, what's going on?" "Jason says you're backing out of the loan. Are you feeling all right? Is everything okay?" "Everything is perfectly fine, Sarah," I said, my voice steady. "I've simply decided to manage my finances differently. I'm no longer able to provide large sums of money or co-sign loans." "But Mom, we were counting on that. We just took out a second mortgage on our new house, assuming Jason's business would take off with your help." "And what about the house? Are you still planning to downsize? We were hoping to help you with that, maybe even buy it from you." Her questions came in a rush, revealing their true motivations. The casual entitlement was gone, replaced by a frantic scramble. "My home is not for sale, Sarah," I stated, my voice firm. "And I have no plans to downsize. This is my home, and it will remain so." But what about us?" she cried, her voice rising. "What about all the help you've given us before? You can't just stop now. We need you, Mom." "You're right, Sarah," I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. "I have helped you. For years, I've sacrificed my own comfort, my own security, for your dreams. And what did I get in return? Exclusion, disrespect, and plans to sell my home behind my back." There was a stunned silence on the other end. I knew my words had hit home. "I will not be your safety net anymore," I repeated, the words a mantra of my newfound strength. "My resources are my own, and I will use them for my own well-being, not to bail you out of your choices." She tried to apologize, to backtrack, to plead for forgiveness, but the words felt hollow, born of desperation, not genuine remorse. I listened for a moment, then calmly ended the call. The confrontations were difficult, painful even, but each one, though it tore at my heart, solidified my resolve. I was no longer the Martha who would quietly sacrifice, who would smile and nod while her heart sank. I was Martha, a woman reclaiming her life, her dignity, and her financial autonomy. The shift in power dynamics was palpable. Their pleas for forgiveness, their sudden panic, revealed their true dependency. They had taken my sacrifices for granted, and now they were facing the consequences. I stood my ground, a beacon of self-respect, no longer a shadow in my own life. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I watched them, a quiet ballet, as I sipped my tea. It had been a few months since I'd drawn my line in the sand, since I'd uttered the words, "no more." The initial shock and anger had settled into a profound sense of peace, a tranquility I hadn't realized I'd been missing for years. My home, the one Jason had so casually dismissed as practically falling apart, felt more like a sanctuary than ever. I hadn't moved. The thought of downsizing, of leaving the place where so many memories resided, now felt like a surrender. This was my home, and I was staying. With a portion of the equity I discovered, I'd made a few small but significant changes. I had the leaky faucet fixed, not by Jason's plumber, but by my own. I had the worn armchair reupholstered in a vibrant blue, a color I'd always loved but never indulged in. I even hired a gardener to help me revitalize the overgrown flower beds, a passion I'd neglected for too long. These weren't grand gestures, but they were my choices, my investments in my comfort. My days now unfolded with a gentle rhythm, dictated by my desires, not by the demands of others. I spent more time reading, exploring new recipes, and reconnecting with old friends. Emily, of course, remained my steadfast confidant. She often came over for tea, her presence a warm, reassuring balm. "You look different, Martha," she'd said last week, her eyes twinkling. "Lighter, like a weight has been lifted." "It has, Emily," I'd replied, a genuine smile on my face, a lifetime of it. The silence from Jason and Sarah hadn't lasted long after my firm boundaries were established. The initial panic, the desperate pleas for forgiveness, had slowly morphed into a more subdued, almost wary approach. Jason called occasionally, his voice devoid of its usual bluster, sounding strained. His business expansion, without the substantial loan he'd expected from me, had stalled. I heard through the grapevine from a mutual acquaintance that he was struggling to secure alternative funding, and the new product line was indefinitely on hold. He was facing significant financial strain, the kind he had always expected me to absorb. He'd tried to subtly reintroduce the idea of my helping out, but I simply reiterated my position, calmly and firmly. "I wish you well, Jason, but my answer remains the same." Sarah, too, had reached out, her calls less frequent, her tone more hesitant. The dream of her new, larger house had become a heavy burden. Without my financial contribution, the second mortgage they'd taken out was proving difficult to manage. I heard hints of marital tension, of arguments over money. She tried to visit a few times, bringing the grandchildren, Michael and Leo, hoping their presence would soften my resolve. I welcomed them with open arms, my love for them undiminished. But when Sarah tried to steer the conversation towards her financial woes, I gently but firmly changed the subject. My boundaries extended to them too. I loved my grandchildren, but I wouldn't allow them to be used as leverage. The consequences of their betrayal lingered, a quiet hum beneath the surface of their lives. They were forced to reevaluate not just their finances, but their entire relationship with me. They had taken my sacrifices for granted, viewing me as an inexhaustible resource. Now, that resource was gone, and they were left to face the fallout of their own choices. It was a harsh lesson, but one they desperately needed to learn. I didn't seek revenge, nor did I revel in their struggles. The emotional scars of their betrayal were still there, a faint ache that resurfaced sometimes, especially when I thought of the real family chat. But the pain no longer defined me. It had become a catalyst, a painful awakening that had forced me to reclaim my own narrative. One quiet afternoon, I sat on my newly cleaned balcony, the one Jason had photographed with such disdain. The sun warmed my face, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree in my yard. I sipped my tea, a simple chamomile, and looked out at the world. I was finally truly living, no longer a shadow, no longer a victim, but a beacon of self-respect and independence. My life was my own, and it was peaceful.